and welcome back to this series where we talk about all the clans, or otherwise known in other games as classes, inside Vampire the Masquerade, the tabletop game. And today we're going to be talking about the bottom of the bottom, which is Thin Bloods. As I stated in my previous episode, most Thin Bloods are considered to be a subset of Caitiff, which are clanless because thin bloods are kind of marked by the mark of having blood that's too weak or quote unquote too thin to actually show the proper characteristics of the clan that has embraced them. Normally, thin bloodedness used to be a flaw in V5 version 5. It is vampires that are of the 14th, 15th, and there are a couple in the 16th generation by this point. 14th generation vampire will not necessarily be a thin blood. About half of them count as thin bloods, and half of them still display enough characteristics of a clan in order to be considered to be part of the clan. In previous editions, thin bloods couldn't learn above a specific amount of dots in a discipline. This can be above 4 or above 3, or in the 16th generation, it would even be above 2. So they were pretty limited. In the newer edition, most of them just don't have abilities at all. They start with a thing called thin blood alchemy, and also the ability to gain resonance from the kind of blood that they eat, which allows them to temporarily borrow a vampiric ability up to 2 dots. So it is a vampiric ability that's pretty low down, unless you take the merit that allows you to start with a ability affinity, which allows you to level exactly one ability as if you were a real vampire and not a thin blood. Thin bloods do carry some bonuses, like they don't really suffer from any kind of vampiric curses, so they don't have like a weakness or a bane, similar to Caitiff in this regard. But they have extra things, such as it really depends on how you build your thin blood. You can, for example, take lifelike, which would allow your thin blood to eat food, have a heartbeat, have sex, as if they were an entirely alive person. You can take a merit that allows you to walk in sunlight and experience absolutely no bad effects from it outside of losing your vampiric powers while you're inside the sunlight. But at the same time, there are flaws exclusive to Thin Blood, such as being unable to mend like a vampire would, and instead healing as if they're entirely mortal, entirely a human. This means that if you get bruised, for a normal vampire can expend 1 blood point and just heal that damage, while meanwhile you're just gonna be sitting there with your bruises for like 3 weeks until they decide to pass on their own, which kind of sucks. So, what kind of vampire Thin Blood is will entirely depend on how you build it. Thin Bloods normally can't create other vampires, but there are exceptions. The Thin Bloods that are of the 14th generation, for example, could have a merit that allows them to sire a vampire or make more vampires, but they will 100% be Thin Bloods because they would be landing into the 15th generation. They can lack other vampiric abilities, like, for example, not have fangs or have very dull fangs that struggle to even pierce skin. They can have very low appetite and therefore not need to feed as often, or they could be suffering from hunger because they can't feed properly, on top of being entirely excluded socially, as you see in vampire mythos. When thin bloods appear, it means that the end of the world, or at the very least the vampire world, is nigh, because that kind of means that it's about the time when really old vampires, including the first generation, will wake up and kind of consume all of the other vampires and, restart the cycle again, which isn't great. Nobody likes seeing Thin Bloods. As such, there's a knee jerk reaction to just start culling them the moment when these vampires, half humans, weirdnesses happen, and just remove them off the planet Earth through the method of death, execution. Ever since 2008, as stated in version 5 lore, Camarilla, which is one of the factions, now requires Thin Bloods to be marked. As a Thin Blood, normally this is a marking that's like a half moon, and this can be a magically inflicted wound through like having a Tremere or someone like that do it, or this could be like a sunlight inflicted tattoo of a half moon that just wouldn't heal. If you have that mark on you as a Thin Blood, you might have permission to exist inside the boundaries of the Camarilla faction, but outsider vampires and anarchs will absolutely shun you because you're marked. You can, on the other hand, like have connections and friends inside the anarch movement, or you can have connections and friends outside of like any factions whatsoever, which is normally called autarchis. Though anarch movement and camarilla movement connections, they're like actual merits, while outside connections, they're not really a thin blood exclusive merit as such, because they wouldn't really count for as much, I guess. But thin bloods can make friends, but they will struggle to have a space for themselves inside the vampiric society because they're seen kind of as like the sign of the apocalypse. And on top of that, they're kind of failed vampire because they're not really part of a clan. They just happen to be a really low generation where they're, well, very high generation where they're barely a vampire anymore, which makes them not a great vampire. Believe it or not. There is this like little blurb that Thin Bloods can receive weird messages from the future and help like through wibbly wobbly, spacey, timey wimey mental waves sort of way, like through their dreams, through divination, like that sort of thing. So sometimes they can receive help in the campaign. I believe there's like a merit for lucid dreamer that allows you to figure out some information about the future from dreams. So the storyteller would have to help you inside the campaign, but inside the lore, it just states that another reason why they're being so feared and so suspected is that they can end up having information about much older and much stronger vampires, like antediluvians, which is like the vampires that existed before the flood. So, really, really, really old geezers, just seemingly out of nowhere. And they can, just like Caitiff, they can actually end up with their own disciplines. Something that is exclusive to the Caitiff, but unlike Caitiff that can like develop proper disciplines because they're not necessarily thin blooded, thin bloods have kind of magicy approach systems effectively of like I am here, what do I do now? So they kind of ended up with thin blood alchemy, which once again allows them to make formulae and give themselves temporary powers inside other disciplines and just use disciplines from multiple other vampires through effectively making potions. but it doesn't allow them to permanently keep that discipline, as in V5, Thin Bloods for the most part are without discipline. Before V5, Thin Bloods really struggled with the disciplines, as everything would cost them twice as much. And obviously, the whole half vampire thing. It is a very different approach to playing vampire. In ways it is a very gimped way of playing a vampire, but it allows for fun storytelling, I guess. And seeing how really weak vampires interplay with bigger societies. Like, for example, inside the Sabbat, which is another faction, which is the wilder, more vampiric faction, there are thin bloods in like this almost day worshipping cult sort of way that are used by the Sabbat because they can walk during daytime, so they have a bit of a status, but they are considered to be just like the rest of the cative trash vampires, so you will have a weird cult of the sun just existing inside a very strong, vampiric, very hardcore, very sadistic faction. Just because they make for a useful weapon, I guess. So the way that you would play a thin blood and the way that your thin blood would interplay with the rest of the vampiric society would change from depending on how you play it and how you build your character and what connections they have, I guess. But you are at a very extreme power imbalance when pitted against anyone else inside this world. This is like playing Vampire the Masquerade on hard mode. So while if you decide to play Caitiff, they're a bit of a build a bear. If you decide to play Thin Blood, your chances of death like skyrocket because you are gimped. You are very much gimped, and other people wanna hunt you down and murder you. Joy, fun. Version 5 of Vampire the Masquerade in general pulls back from playing superheroes with fangs because you if you want to have access to really old vampires like elders, you kind of sort of need to homebrew them. While the ability to play a thin blood is their like front face and center. So the game is more about stories of oppression now than it is a dark fantasy, which is frankly not as fun. Therefore, the version that I play the most is V20, which you can create the thin blood by taking the thin blooded flaw, but most people don't really play thin bloods. They play proper vampires. And if you wanna play someone that's an outcast and doesn't suffer from weaknesses of like other clans, I would say that Caitiff is the more attractive choice. So, despite the fact that Thin Bloods are very unique and gotten their own very specific things that could turn into a fun campaign, you're still playing something that's underpowered, which I suppose will appeal to a certain kind of person, but that's not necessarily what people are looking for when they're coming over to play a vampire fantasy. Plus, you can experience a lot of those stories that you can play with a thin blood playing any other kind of vampire. They can still like grapple with being excluded from a group or being hunted. I mean, there's outright bloodlines that have are also hunted, like Salubri or Bali, except that they're not thin blooded, so you're still like a proper vampire, and you can have your own like full on drama about aging and losing your family and interplay of politics. You don't literally need to pick up a gimped character as such. I don't know, man. Thin bloods aren't exactly my thing. It's like a tool for you to set up to play a very much oppressed character, and that's not necessarily my type of fun. I mean, whoever likes that, more power to them, but it's a bit of a weird choice to make them like a highly advertised selling point for the newest edition, effectively. So that's about it. Like, you are gimped. You are very gimped. You have to take some merits and some flaws upon character creation, three of each, for like up to three, rather, of like merits and flaws that allow you to build a very unique thin blood, which a range of how human you are versus how vampire you are versus if you carry any kind of, I don't know, friend in any kind of faction or not. And there you go. It's There's not a lot to say about them except that you are very limited in what you play and how you play it. Sure, alchemy is a thing, and drinking blood can give you like access to an ability temporarily, but it's like up to 2 points. It means that you're never gonna play with the really fun OP abilities because, well, you're really only sort of a vampire, and on top of that, everybody hates you. I don't know, maybe it's just me. Have you tried playing Thin Bloods? Do you enjoy Thin Bloods? Do you think that they're a good addition to the game? Do you think that they're a bad addition to the game? Like, lore wise, I don't mind them, but I don't feel particularly pulled to ever play one personally. So yeah, if you have gotten so far into the video, thank you so much for watching. I hope that I explained what a thin blood is pretty well. It's not a very hard concept. It's a vampire that's so high up on the generation scale, so far away from the first vampire that they're barely a vampire anymore. And there's like whole 3 generations worth of vampires that can count as barely a vampire, which is like 14th, 15th, and 16th. 16th should be like super rare slash almost non existent. Some 15th generation thin bloods can reproduce and produce vampires, which is a mortal with access to 1 dot in like their chosen disciplines. So they have vampire powers only up to like 1 dot, but they are mortal born from a thin blood. That's practically the only way to get a vampire. Vampires are no babies. They get murdered whenever they found out. So they're also supposed to be extra rare, and that's about it really. Thin bloods are an oddity in the world of vampire, both inside the lore with how others view them, and both outside the lore of how players can like view this. It's like deciding to play the game on hard mode. I suppose there are people that enjoy that, like more power to them. If you're still here, thank you for giving me all your attention. I love it. If you like my videos, check out what the rest of my channel has, and perhaps, consider subscribing. When we're back, we're going to be talking about Hecata, which will probably turn into its own series, because I am not planning on covering the whole of Hecata in one video. So maybe I'll cover it like from a fifth version of the game point of view, and then what makes up Hecata in the fifth version of the game is like various different bloodlines in any previous games. So I will just dedicate time to like each of those bloodlines individually. That seems to be the fairest way of doing. So you can look forward to that. And thank you so much for my Patreon supporters that allow me to make videos like that. If you have any like questions, you didn't understand something about the video, please feel free to ask them in the comment section down below. Share your opinions. Tell me if I'm wrong. Sometimes that happens. I try my best, but in the end I'm just a passionate fan for the universe rather than like a writer or creator or anyone else. And I am not a very professional human being. So sometimes I get airheaded, sometimes information escapes me, and sometimes I don't cover it quite right. So when that happens, it's good when people let me know. And if you have like any requests or any like specific desires for videos on like factions or bloodlines or whatever, feel free to leave that in the comment section down below. The series, while I'm now running out of clans, is still not over, as I will be going over bloodlines that make up necromancers, but I also want to investigate some independent bloodlines that I haven't covered yet, so we still have that to do. Then I do want to cover factions, at least to some extent, so more videos still to come. I hope I'm gonna see you there. Did I already thank my Patreons? I probably did. Well, thank you again, Patreons. And I hope I'm gonna see you in my other videos. Toodaloo.